everybody. This is Daniel. Today I wanted to talk to you about social media, asking whether or not it's dangerous. In short, yes, it is. But allow me to explain why. Now, what happens is, when you're going through your feed, keeping in mind Facebook purposely designed their system to be addictive. And the key is understanding how. Now, when you're going through your feed, you're getting constant new stuff coming up that causes the conscious mind to disengage and the emotional mind to take over. It's very similar to the mechanisms that trigger fight or flight. When you're exposed to something you don't consciously have defined, the emotional mind takes over to react to it while the conscious mind observes. So the next time you encounter it, the conscious mind has a premise on which to act. But in social media, it's constantly a new feed. So there's no resolution to it. And it reinforces the subconscious mind. Now, there's future videos that I can get into that involve what I call my blood flow theory. Dictating that perception creates blood flow brings nutrients bring growth. So what you focus on is what you cause to grow. Now, this affects everything from emotional states, subconscious associations through reinforcement, the development of your brain, the development of your body. It affects everything. So what happens, especially politically right now, is you get all this propaganda that's on social media. I don't think anybody can really deny that's existence. Now, because your conscious mind is disengaged, it's not there to monitor what you're being fed. Now, the normal premise is you consciously perceive it, and what the conscious mind accepts is fed into the subconscious. And then the subconscious, of course, does its own associations and metaphors based on that. But because your conscious mind is not active, it's not filtering or affecting anything, and everything you're seeing on social media is basically being absorbed directly into your subconscious. And that is a very dangerous thing if you don't have control over what you're absorbing. It's very indicative of hypnosis and how hypnosis works. They use tricks to cause your conscious mind to disengage so they can speak directly with your subconscious. That is what social media does. And there's ample evidence. I mean, try having a conversation with somebody that's of a different political party than you. You can agree on everything, but the second you get on that, all of a sudden it's like you're talking to a different person. And it gets to the point where they just start lashing out, like verbatim, the arguments that you hear from the polarized party. And they'll just shout out, just declarations, obviously completely closed down to any actual discourse or to addressing the situations in play. You try to sit there and have a factual debate with somebody that is emotionally reacting, all they're going to do is lash out at you. They're not listening. One of my rules when it comes to civil discourse is you have to talk calmly. If you feel the need to raise your voice, it's because either consciously or subconsciously, you feel you're not being heard. So you start raising your voice. And as you raise your voice, they can no longer compete. You're no longer listening to what they have to say. So they feel like they have to raise their voice. Next thing you know, you're yelling at each other and not listening to anything each other is saying. It goes from a debate to an argument. And a lot of that is driven by these subconscious messages and associations that we consciously oftentimes aren't even really aware of. I've had conversations with people and they would just lash out with this ridiculous notion. And I could see the look on their face, whether they wanted to admit it or not. They were just as shocked they said it as I was. And I'm like, where did that come from? And they didn't even know. But how that works within the subconscious is, I refer them as link minds. Kind of similar to like underwater mines, where the concussion of one can set off the explosion of another. Well, your subconscious works in a similar fashion, where you can have different events within your life that have paralleled associations. A lot of the way, like people that have gone through trauma or abuse, there are certain things that stand out about those incidences. And if they're just going through the day and something else happens that maintains the same association, it causes them to subconsciously relive that event. It's a very common issue with PTSD, because one thing they don't really talk about the flashbacks and nightmares. I plan on doing a full video on PTSD because, I got it when I was 16. I've studied it for several years. I got a lot of stuff on that. But they talk a lot about the nightmares and flashbacks. They don't talk about the associations, those subconscious triggers that just nest inside your mind. And it could be, for instance, particularly like a war veteran or something. Why a car's backfiring causes them to fall to the ground. It's an involuntary response driven by a subconscious mind just exploding in their head. And all of a sudden there's a part of them that's right back in that situation, and it takes some time to realize they're not. That's what, flashbacks and everything are all about, is a subconscious mind projecting directly onto the conscious mind to communicate what, its concerns. Now, like I said, I'm planning on making a full video on that, going into a lot more depth. So I don't want to digress too much. I'm bad about that. But back to social media. Especially with big tech, it has clearly been seen that there is a major political bias. And you can see severe lines being drawn between people. It's all about segregation, because the smaller the group is, the easier to control. And they're training these people almost like sleeper cells. Referring to, a lot of times you'd see it in like sci-fi, where a person would just be out doing the job, they get a phone call, they'd say a word, and all of a sudden it's an automated. Just go in to do this thing. The scary part is stuff like that is actually possible with enough reinforcement and conditioning. And that is what social media has become. It's become a conditioning echo chamber, where all this is filtering directly into your subconscious, and your conscious mind is no longer allowed to be a part of a conversation when that is the most important part that needs to be there. To be able to pay attention, to perceive, to look at the details, instead of to look for the agenda. And that's exactly what's going on. The agenda resides within the subconscious at this point. It's an echo chamber telling you what you are allowed to see, what you are not allowed to see, what you are allowed to think, and what you are forced to dismiss. And that's why so many discussions politically have become about feelings instead of facts. Because facts don't give you that emotional gratification that an emotional release does. And they feed these into the subconscious to associate those triggers with emotional release. So it doesn't feel right to just go pure analytical and to ignore the emotional content of it. You have to feed into the emotional content, because that's the part that is feeding you back. But the problem is the emotional mind is very easy to manipulate, to indoctrinate, and to control, oftentimes without people even realizing it. And social media has become a very big part of that. Now, when you also add in the excessive censorship of big tech that has been going on, like, I'm not sure how long my channel is even going to be here before, the wrong person sees it, reports it, and my entire channel is removed. Because I'm not saying what they want me to say. They want to have full control over the narrative. So while you're scrolling through and you're getting all this input in, they choose who you are. You become what they want you to be to serve their purpose. You become their sleeper cell without even realizing it. That is something that severely needs to be. I've already deleted my Facebook, Twitter. I don't even have Amazon Prime anymore, because they have become a part of that big censorship. And America is supposed to be about freedom. We don't have to agree, but we should all be able to accept that we're still people despite our disagreements. And one of the primary conflicts that have come into place is, in particular, not trying to get into politics too much with it, but you can't really avoid it. The left has become extremely counterculture when it comes to America and what America is actually supposed to stand for. Freedom of speech, the Second Amendment, the ability to defend yourself against a tyrannical government. These things have been consistently attacked by the left. And a severe double standard has been put in place. You're not allowed to say your opinion unless it agrees with their narrative. And if they don't agree with what you say, they seek to have you completely removed from your platform. Look at the stuff they're doing to President Trump right now, where they're actively trying to attack his businesses, his way of life, everything about it. They're trying to destroy him simply because he did not agree with a lot of stuff they were pushing, and he actively went against it. Look at the level of censorship where in his speech on January 6th, He adamantly said peacefully. He did not promote violence in anything. And yet Facebook, Twitter, and all them censor the video. You can't hear what he says, and they tell you that he's inciting violence because they want you to believe it. And as it goes into your subconscious, it gets reinforced more and more, and you get to the point you don't even question it. And that is the major part of the problem. When something gets ingrained in your subconscious, you just accept it. You don't look for the details to say, wait, that's not right. Because to disagree with that is like you're disagreeing with yourself because you've already accepted it. Who wants to disagree with himself? That's why a difference of opinion is treated as a personal attack now. I can't disagree with somebody without them feeling like I'm attacking who they are. And that's how ingrained this has become. And like I said, social media is the key factor for it. That is what has enabled them to push this to this level. They've completely removed Parler because they considered a conservative website. And to my understanding, I didn't see it, but I've heard from people that, yeah, there was a lot of people saying stuff they shouldn't have said on it. And yet those people's accounts should be removed. You know, that's just not okay in that regard. The situation is just getting worse. And unfortunately, it's going to continue getting worse because nobody's trying to find middle ground. As the Democrats now have the House, the Senate, and they're going to have the presidency, they're going to continue severely overreaching. And it's going to cause extreme anger from conservatives and independents because, let's face it, our rights are being stripped away. Everything that America was is being destroyed in a major coup and power grab that's been built up over years. And they've realized at this point they're at a precipice. It's become too obvious. So they either have to force it through and stop you from having the option of doing anything about it, or give up. And they're not going to give up. They've come too far to give up. So that's not what this video is supposed to be about. But when it comes to, like I said, social media, personally, I deleted all that. If you do still have one, you're welcome to link my video to it so other people can see it if you think there's value in it and stuff that people need to hear. Obviously, I do, or I wouldn't have made this video. I did a lot of studying on the conscious mind, the subconscious mind, and the psychosomatic correlations between the mind and the body to understand how all this stuff works together and how it affects us the way it does. And the stuff I've seen is terrifying of how we're all being manipulated. And it's gotten to the point that even on the right, there's elements of the same type of behavior. But the basic personality complex is very different between the modern Democrats and the modern Republicans. The modern Republicans, yeah, they're frustrated, and a lot of them are trying to work within the law system to combat everything that's going on, and the Democrats are blatantly breaking laws and getting away with it. So there's no viable way for Republicans to win that way. But at the same time, if they devolved to the same tactics that the Democrats have been using, they would no longer be who they are supposed to be. So it puts them in a almost paradoxical state. And that's a lot of the conflict I think they're dealing with. And then, of course, you also have the career politicians that are just selling Trump out because they want to protect their career. It's obvious that Biden's going to win, and it's obvious the Democrats go for the throat. If they disagree with you, if they see you as a threat, you're done. Your career's over, and there's been deaths. Yeah, of course there's no evidence because any evidence gets dismissed. Like, look at the election. They refused to even acknowledge the evidence. They blatantly said, nothing's there, nothing's there. Then what is the harm in taking the time to actually analyze the evidence so they could disprove it to put the people at ease? They know there was a lot of evidence. They didn't want you to see it. So they dismissed it, they act like it didn't exist, and they pushed their way through it, and Republicans couldn't do anything about it, excuse me, because they following the rules. The situation we found ourselves in is a very unstable scenario where there is no easy, smooth way of resolving it. We're dealing with one political party that lacks the ability to effectively counter the other, and that other party has a complete disregard for the establishment and the rules that it's supposed to be following in its procedures. They're changing rules on the fly. There is a strong correlation now with the Biden administration and big tech, the very people that have been censoring our language. Social media being part of it, Amazon, Google, all these. They're becoming a part of the democratic construct that is no longer about democracy. It's about authoritarianism. It's about them telling you what you have to think, what you have to be, where you can go, when you can go there. What do you think a lot of the restrictions for COVID were? They're still doing that. There's a lot of cases where science is run contrary to what the political agenda is, and it's just suppressed. If you look on the CDC website, it flat out tells you that masks don't help. I could actually link you specifically to it. If you like, I will put the link as the first comment in this video so you can go check for yourself. It says on the box for the masks, it does not protect you against COVID, yet they mandate everybody wear them because it psychologically keeps people suppressed. It makes you submissive. It makes you scared. It makes you more controllable. Again, not trying to get into that. I'm digressing again. Sorry. So I'm just going to back to topic to sum it up because this is already getting to be a longer video. And social media has become very dangerous because it is both very addictive because of the level of stimulation and dopamine release you get from all these constant feeds just entertaining you. It's very detrimental to your attention span because you're not really focusing on anything for any specific period of time. It's just constant distraction, much like TikTok and all those things are. They're indoctrination sources for like ADHD practically. They teach people not to be able to pay attention for any extended period of time. Also, the feeding of the reactionary aspect of the mind causes additional blood flow to go to the amygdala, the emotional centers of the mind. And this is causing people to become more and more emotional. And the more emotional you are, the more difficult it is to logically stop and look at what's going on. And you wonder why people have been acting and reacting the way they have. So anyway, that's what I wanted to talk about today. I'm going to stop this here, get this uploaded, and see how long before it gets removed. So, you have yourselves a nice evening. Good night.